Could you please find your seats? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's continue our session. Our next business today concerns the finances of the Assembly. I call our President, Paolo Ali, on behalf of our Treasurer, Mark Angel, to introduce the 2018 draft budget. Paolo, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Colleagues, Mark Angel, our treasurer, asked me to stand in for him. He knows that I am the treasurer of my party and I'm used to this type of communication, so it's not new for me. Let me begin by reassuring you that for the current financial year, all is going according to the plans, and we firmly expect to remain within the budget. I would also like to thank the Swiss Ministry of Defense for their generous contribution to outreach programs and to all the members and non-member delegation who have hosted visits and seminars. The only financial point on today's agenda is the draft budget for 2018. The document was approved by the Standing Committee yesterday afternoon. Essentially, the Treasurer proposes that the 2018 budget will reflect the rate of inflation. This will allow us to meet our obligation in terms of salaries, personal costs, and real expenditures on running costs. Regarding the national contributions, 2019 will be the first year that the budget will be divided between 29 member countries. The new contribution key for 2018, adopted by NATO in September, will apply to our budget in accordance with our financial rules. I hope that the Plenary Assembly will adopt this 2018 draft budget. As always, the International Secretariat and Mark are, of course, at your disposal to respond to any comments or questions you might have. That's all.
Thank you, Paolo. Does anyone want to speak? Any questions? Any comments? No? We'll now vote on the draft budget. So please find your voting cards. Those in favor of the budget, please raise your hands. Those against? Any abstentions? The draft budget is agreed. Thank you, Paolo, and thank you to all of you. The next order of the day is the election of the Bureau of our Assembly, starting with the President. The Standing Committee has received only one nomination, and that is Mr. Paolo Ali from Italy. There is only one candidate for the post, so the election can take place by acclamation, which I now invite the Assembly to do. I declare Paolo Ali re-elected as President of the Assembly. Congratulations, Paolo. We now proceed to the election of the Vice Presidents. The Standing Committee received 5 nominations for the 5 positions of Vice President. 4 of the current Vice Presidents are eligible for re-election and have put themselves forward. The 5 nominations are Joseph Joe Day from Canada. Oh, yes. Rasa Juknevitsene from Lithuania. I tried my best. Metin Lufti Baydar from Turkey. Lord Campbell from the United Kingdom. And the new one is Vitalino Canas from Portugal. As there are 5 candidates for 5 positions, the election can take place by acclamation, which I now invite the Assembly to do. So please, let's give them applause. I declare the 5 vice presidents elected. Congratulations to you all. We now proceed to the election of a treasurer. Our current treasurer, Marc Angel from Luxembourg, has indicated that he is willing to stand for another 2-year term, and no other candidate has put themselves forward. So I invite the Assembly to approve the re-election of Marc Angel as treasurer of the Assembly by acclamation. Thank you. Marc Angel is re-elected as treasurer for another 2 years. We come now to an amendment to the Assembly's rules of procedure relating to the voting rights of the Montenegrin delegation in the Standing Committee. This amendment to the rules of procedure was agreed by the Standing Committee in our meeting yesterday. Is the Assembly ready to adopt this amendment? Yes? Okay, find your voting cards. Those in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. The amendment is adopted.
Sverre, can I take the opportunity to thank you on behalf of the Assembly for your service? You have been with us since 2005 and have been a leading figure in the Defense and Security Committee and most recently as Vice President of the Assembly. Thank you, Sverre, for your work with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We come now to the resolutions which have been agreed by the committees of the Assembly. There are 8 texts in total, which we shall deal with in the order set out on the notice paper. A total of 3 amendments have been received. Copies of the amendments are available outside the hall. Voting cards have been distributed. After each resolution has been presented, I propose a time limit of 1 minute for other speakers and for anyone presenting amendment. Is this okay for you? Thank you. So, Economics and Security Committee, the European Defence Industrial Base. We start with this draft resolution. 1 amendment has been tabled to the draft resolution. I call Jean-Marie Bockel, General Rapporteur, to present the draft resolution. Jean-Marie, you have the floor.
I will speak in French. Mes chers collègues, c'est un plaisir pour moi.
My dear colleagues, it is an honor for me to present this draft resolution on the European Defence Industrial Base, and I will just briefly highlight the main points. The absence of coordination and planification of procurement policies in defence arena would cost roughly 24.6 billion euros to the European allies. There is on this continent there are more manufacturers of helicopters than there are member states of the EU. I am quoting here the Secretary General's when he insisted on this aspect earlier on. on this abnormal situation. Beyond the strategic and financial challenges raised by the absence of a single European defence market, as well as the weakness of the industrial and technological base of European defence could, in the long run, threaten the cohesion of our alliance. We need, via the integration of the European market, to guarantee the acquisition of necessary capabilities to ensure the deterrence and defence against all threat that could undermine the security of the alliance within this very dangerous situation. Given this situation, the resolution stresses, first of all, that to live up to our commitments of our respective governments, we must redouble our efforts, especially in the area of research and development. In order to do this, we must restructure our defence budget, is necessary, as well as the pursuit of policies aiming to pooling our military capabilities and the burden sharing. It is also necessary to agree shortly for long-term agreements without which our defence capabilities will lose ground that will be hard to catch up. Reducing the fragmentation of the European defence industry is an absolute priority to give meaning to the increase of military spending that several of you have mentioned beforehand to questions to the Secretary General. Such a restructuring can only be carried out without the cooperation of the EU, which is a major player for the consolidation of the industrial base of the European defence, but also with other European actors such as the UK after Brexit. So flexibility and openness must remain the key elements of such a far-reaching project. I note that the recent European summits, and especially in June, are encouraging in this regard. My dear colleagues, let us honour our commitment and let us be ambitious to achieve an industrial and technological base for Europe that be strong and united. We have the opportunity today to reinforce the cohesion of the alliance at a time of great uncertainty and political division. We have to rise up to these challenges. Thank you very much.
Does anyone wish to speak in general on the draft resolution? Are there any comments? I see no comments. So now we move to the amendment number 1, which would amend the sub-paragraph 19A. Jean-Marie, would you like to present the amendment?
Yes. Il s'agit donc en fait d'un amendement de
Well, it's a question of technical coordination among the different committees. In fact, 3 of the resolutions, among that the one we're discussing now, make reference to the commitments to increase our defense spending. These commitments made at the Wales Summit in 2014. And it's essential for the coherence of these intentions that the paragraphs be drafted with the identical wording in the 3 resolutions. And that's the meaning of this amendment. So I explained this in the committee, and in particular in the Committee on Economics and Security Committee. We heard the position of our German colleagues, and we had accepted that position. It was supported by the other members of the committee to take account of a German amendment, which we then amended in turn. We had to change the wording of the resolution. So in the committee, the German position was heard, taken account of. We have to say that. But since the other resolutions were not put in line in the different committees, today we run the risk of having texts which are not really in line. And it seems to us to be a better idea to go back to the initial wording by adopting this technical amendment, which will enable us to find, to have coherence, clarity, and to strengthen the political coherence of our resolutions. So our German colleagues' position was taken into account and accepted. And so here in the plenary session, we have to take account of all of the resolutions. And so I think it's probably even more important than the compromise that we found. We have to ensure the coherence among our positions. And that's the purpose of our amendment. Thank you, Jean-Marie.
No comments. So now I put the amendment number 1 to the vote. All those in favor of amendment 1, please raise your voting cards. Against? Abstentions? The amendment is agreed to. We now vote the draft resolution as amended. We have to vote the resolution, sorry. Who is in favor of the resolution as amended? Raise your cards, please. Against? Abstentions? The draft resolution is agreed to. So, congratulations. We come now to the first draft resolution from the Committee on Civil Dimension of Security on Stability and Security in the Black Sea region. One amendment has been tabled to the draft resolution. I call Mrs. Jane Cordy, Rapporteur of the Subcommittee on Democratic Governance, on behalf of Mrs. Ulla Schmidt, Special Rapporteur, to present the draft resolution. Jane, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. And colleagues, it's my privilege to present to you the resolution on the Black Sea, which was drafted by my colleague Ulla Schmidt from Germany and adopted yesterday by the Committee of Civil Dimensions of Security. And I want to thank Ulla for the exceptional work that she has done both on the report and in this resolution. The resolution highlights the importance of the Black Sea for the Euro-Atlantic community and the support for our allies and for our partners in that region. This resolution builds on Ulla's special report and demonstrates our Assembly's commitment to the Black Sea region. I believe it's timely to reiterate our vision for the Black Sea, a democratic space free from conflict. There is a concern that continued violations of sovereignty, the numerous frozen conflicts, and an increasing tense maritime security situation hinder regional stability and cooperative initiatives. Russian military buildup and violation of Ukrainian and Georgian territorial integrity demands a firm, a proportionate, and a prudent response. Allied leaders have made important decisions in recent summits to ensure its regional allies and partners, and we should indeed welcome and implement these decisions. At the same time, we should continue looking for ways to reignite inclusive regional cooperation in order to reduce tensions, foster regional stability, and facilitate peaceful resolution of conflicts. We continue to emphasize the importance of regional fora such as the Organization of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation and the Black Sea Trade and Development Bank as central initiatives that require our continued backing. We encourage all NATO allies, along with the European Union, to strengthen our engagement in the region. We should also make explicit our commitment to upholding international laws that govern the Black Sea. Furthermore, this resolution is purposed to demonstrate broad and enduring support for all democratic reforms and anti-corruption efforts in the Black Sea. It is our job to speak out against and hold each other accountable for democratic backsliding and to promote media freedom and good governance throughout the Euro-Atlantic space. Political stability, restoration of sovereignty, and human rights and democracy in the Black Sea region are integral to Euro-Atlantic security. Colleagues, I hope I can count on your support for these efforts and continued investment in the Black Sea. The region is vital to the security of Europe and will continue to be an area of engagement for NATO in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any comment on the draft resolution? I see no comments. So now we move straight to the amendment number 1, which would amend the subparagraph 12E. I call Irina Fritz to present the amendment. Irina, you have 1 minute.
Благодарю, господин председатель, госпожа.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Point 12A, which we would like to amend, was included in the draft resolution when the resolution was considered by the committee. And it is of purely technical character because in point 10, with the reference to the decision of Bucharest summit, there is a mention of Ukraine and Georgia. That's why in point 12A, we suggest that we add the words after the word Georgia and Ukraine.
amendment. So it will now read to 12E to continue strategic discussions with Georgia and Ukraine will be added. And on Black Sea security, further enhance Georgia's and Ukraine's engagement. We've spoken to Ula. She agrees with that amendment, and I also agree with that amendment.
Any comment? So, who is in favor of the amendment, please raise your voting cards. Those against? Abstentions? The amendment is approved, and now we vote the draft resolution as amended. Those in favor, please. Against? Abstentions? The resolution is approved. Thank you. We now come to the second draft resolution from the Committee on the Civil Dimension of Security on confronting the weaponization of information. One amendment has been tabled. Jane, you have the floor again to present the resolution.
Thank you again, Mr. President. And I'd first like to thank our committee director, Andreas Avicius, for the hard work that he does for our committee at each and every session that we have. The resolution on confronting the weaponization of information was adopted unanimously by the Committee on Civil Dimensions and Security at our meeting yesterday, and it addresses the security challenges of cyber revolution. And we heard a number of questions this morning related specifically to the cyber resolution and social media. Indeed, Facebook, Twitter, and other information platforms and technologies have transformed our societies in fundamental ways. This revolution is changing our political systems, international relations, and indeed global security. It has expanded public dialogue, brought new issues to the fore, empowered anti-corruption crusaders, and helped mobilize civil society across the globe. At the same time, social media can result in fragmentation and polarization of societies, and it can give greater visibility to radical views and facilitate dissemination of fake news, thus undermining faith in journalism and in our institutions. The West has invented the internet and social media technologies, but in some ways these technologies have been turned against us. For Russia, the cyber domain is clearly a battlefield. Ironically enough, while suppressing media freedom at home, Moscow has developed a sophisticated and well-funded disinformation and trolling machine to exploit the openness of the media landscape in the democratic world. Extremist groups, especially the so-called Daesh terrorist organization, are also skillfully using the information and communication technologies for their purposes. Although hundreds of thousands of Daesh's social media accounts have been closed, Daesh, like the Lernian Hydra, seems to have the ability to quickly regenerate and reestablish connection with its users. But malign actors are not invincible, and their activities could be countered and curtailed. A number of important steps have been taken by the Euro-Atlantic community, both on multinational and national, as well as civic society levels. At the same time, a number of additional steps need to be taken by our governments to adapt to the challenges of the information age. In particular, the draft resolution recommends designating specific institutions responsible for identifying disinformation attacks and then countering these attacks with facts. This is important, although we have to be realistic and understand that we will not be able to counter the fire hose of falsehood with the squirt gun of truth. We will need to continue applying restrictive measures such as removal of the extremist contents and blacklisting of the most active disinformation warriors. Our armed forces will need to adapt faster and should incorporate social media aspects in the training and exercises of their personnel. The capacity to use social media effectively at every level of command should be built into training. We need to establish we need to establish robust partnerships with media companies to enhance their capabilities dedicated to taking down unlawful content and developing fact-checking software. And of course, we need to invest more in educating citizens and developing their digital competencies and critical thinking so that they are able to recognize the use of trolls and bots. And finally, while countering these challenges, we should always remain faithful to the principles of openness, pluralism, and inclusion that underpin our great alliance. Thank you, and I hope that you will support the adoption of this important resolution.
Thank you. Any comments on the draft resolution? I see no comments, so now we move to the amendment number 1, which would amend the title of the resolution. I call Carl Lammers to present the amendment. Carl, please.
We think that it could be valuable to fulfill with the word disinformation. I think that could be useful to do this, and if I see right, you have accepted it, Jane.
Thank you very much, Carl, and we are certainly willing to accept that amendment because it is also misinformation or disinformation that is part of the problem.
Thank you. Any comment? So we can vote the amendment. Those in favor, please raise your voting cards. Those against? Abstentions? The amendment is approved. Now we vote for the draft resolution as amended. Those in favor? Against? Abstentions? The resolution is agreed to. Thank you.
Thank you, President.
We come next to the first draft resolution from Defense and Security Committee on supporting the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces. No amendments have been tabled to this draft resolution. I ask Joe Day, General Rapporteur, to present the draft resolution. Joe, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, as the President indicated, we have two draft resolutions to present to you. These resolutions went through extensive review in the Defense and Security Committee. Several amendments were accepted at that time. The resolution that I'm now presenting to you as the General Rapporteur flows from a report that was done by Mr. Hillmeyer in our committee. The Defense and Security Committee is presenting this resolution calling for the Alliance's continued support of the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces. And this resolution is pretty straightforward and we believe necessary. Our governments have invested significantly in Afghanistan over the past 14 years. Again this year, our governments agreed to renew their resolve to continue their efforts in Afghanistan. Many are heeding the recent calls for increased funding and increased the forces in Afghanistan in the battle to turn the tide against the Taliban once and for all. While the United States is leading the way in this effort, many other allies are following suit, as you've heard from our Secretary General. Why do we need to do this? The answer is simple. Despite progress made by the Train, Advise, and Assist mission with the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces, as well as international efforts to mediate between the government of Kabul and the Taliban, the road to peace in Afghanistan remains an uphill struggle. As a result, lasting security for many Afghans remains elusive. Allies and their international partners expect a return on their investment from the Afghan government, meaning building strong institutions capable of creating the kind of prosperity needed to block the pathway that would allow for a slide back into a civil war in Afghanistan. This resolution makes this message clear. It urges the Afghan government to implement President Ghani's roadmaps and frameworks to achieve much-needed security, institutional reform, and self-reliance. We hope this resolution will send a message of support to the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces, an important call to the government in Kabul to take the steps necessary to create a stable, peaceful, and prosperous state that will never again become a source of regional insecurity or a wellspring for global terrorism. You heard the Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg call for this type of support from us as parliamentarians, and we're putting this resolution forward in that regard. I seek your support for this resolution, colleagues.
Thank you, Joe. Any comment? I see no comments. So now we vote on the draft resolution. Who is in favor? Who is against? Abstentions? Approved. Thank you. We come now to the second draft resolution from the Defense and Security Committee on closer NATO-EU cooperation. Also, in this case, we have no amendments. And Joe, you have the floor again to present the draft declaration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, colleagues, this particular resolution of the Defense and Security Committee builds on the work that we have been doing and will continue to do in the committee. Colleagues, since the signing of the Warsaw Declaration last year, NATO-EU cooperation has witnessed remarkable momentum. While the idea has often been raised in past years, NATO-EU cooperation became a byword for much talk, followed by little concrete action. The past year shows that times have changed. Indeed, the broad spectrum of security challenges Europe is facing today is a constant reminder more synergistic cooperation between NATO and the European Union is needed. This resolution urges governments and parliaments of NATO and the European Union to do their part to encourage closer alignment of security priorities in the areas of joint capability development, as well as to expand the breadth and depth of existing NATO-EU cooperation in counterterrorism, cybersecurity, hybrid awareness, and defense. Further, we call for focused diplomatic efforts to overcome existing obstacles to closer EU-NATO cooperation, particularly concerning Cyprus. The resolution also seeks to encourage new EU initiatives to bolster their efforts to increase their attention to all areas related to security, from the European Defence Fund to permanent structured cooperation to all the other ways the Union is seeking to strengthen the common security and defense policy. Colleagues, this resolution is a vote of strong support for the new momentum in the NATO-EU cooperation. Given the challenges of today's complex international security environment, enterprises such as this are the only way forward. I seek your support for this resolution.
Thank you, Joe. Is there any comment? Comment? No comments. So, who is in favor? Sorry. You have. Oh, okay, sorry, Lord Campbell.
A very brief comment, if I may, but to a large extent provoked by the speech of the Secretary General that we heard a little earlier. When the idea of a European security, defence and identity was first mooted in the late 1990s, the United States, through its very distinguished Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, expressed three reservations, which came to be called the 3 Ds. The first was the possibility of delinking between Europe and North America. The second was discrimination against non-members of the European Union. I think that both the resolution and everything that we've discussed around these two issues we can be confident about. But the third was duplication. And in a time of resource issues, when countries are trying, as we've heard today, to reach the 2% target, and generally when economies may be under some pressure, then it does seem to me important that in passing this resolution we should remember that we should not be duplicating the manufacture of helicopters if we can avoid it, and we should certainly not be duplicating structures, because that seems to me to be likely to be financially contrary to the degree of cooperation which the resolution clearly embodies.
Thank you, Lord Campbell, and I take that as a comment of support for this resolution.
Any other comment? So who is in favor of the resolution, please raise your cards. Who is against? Abstentions? The resolution is approved. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, colleagues.
We now come to the draft first resolution from the Political Committee on tackling challenges from the South. No amendments. I call Mr. Giulio Miranda Caglia, Rapporteur of the Subcommittee on NATO Partnership, to present the resolution. Giulio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President. And after 4 reports presented by Canada, now is the turn from Portugal to present a report. And the report is related, the resolution is related to tackling the challenges from the South. That was adopted by the Political Committee. Spreading instability in the Middle East and North Africa impacts Euro-Atlantic security, and NATO must be a stakeholder of an approach to conflict prevention and resolution in the region. As I speak, Daesh is losing ground in the Middle East. The global coalition has made considerable progress on the battlefield, and the so-called Caliphate has lost about 90% of the territory it used to hold in Iraq, and 65% in Syria. In Europe, the flux of migrants from Eastern Med route is drying up, at least for the moment. Eurostat's Asylum Quarterly Report reveals that Syrians, followed by Afghans and Iraqis, contributed most to the overall decrease in first-time asylum applicants in the European Union, with almost 90,000 fewer applicants compared with the first quarter of 2016. Such developments are positive, but it does not mean that the challenges our partners in the MENA region and we are facing have disappeared. Underlying problems of extremism, underdevelopment, and sectarian conflicts that fueled the rise of the terrorist organization in 2014 still need to be addressed. security in the region remains highly volatile. Instability is also spreading in the Arabian Peninsula. With this in mind, this resolution recognizes that sustained efforts are needed from the alliance in order to tackle challenges on its southern flank and calls for, first, repeated support of the Syrian peace process, including the application of diplomatic pressure on the regime of Bashar al-Assad and its allies. Second, continuing the fight against Daesh in Iraq and Syria within the global coalition. Third, improving situational awareness and information sharing with the NATO and with partners regarding the crisis affecting security in the Euro-Mediterranean area. Sustaining and where necessary and possible increasing financial and technical support to partners in the MENA region to help them in capacity defense building. Encouraging partner countries of the Mediterranean dialogue and the Istanbul cooperation to work to foster interethnic and inter-sectarian reconciliation and to pursue an inclusive political process. Improving, finally, NATO-European Union cooperation in the South in areas such as maritime security and defense capacity building. This sums up the key points the resolution makes. And we had certainly interesting debate in our committee about these subjects. This corresponds also to one of the targets and priorities that were made in Warsaw. And you remember in Warsaw there were two lines. First, the cyber defense could be, and it is anyway, an operation, a military operation also. But at the same time facing the problems and the question and challenges that come from the South. And this report with this resolution is an answer, but is of course also a way to present the situation in the south flank of NATO and in, of course, Middle East, North Africa, but also inside Africa in order to be prepared to face these kind of challenges. So I thank you very much for your attention and I look forward to your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Giulio. Any comment? Berat.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear Rapporteur, thanks for your work on the report. Yesterday, we discussed this important topic, tackling the challenges from the South, both through your report and the draft resolution. Clearly, by the time of the writing of this report, the KRG referendum in Iraq did not take place, but our plenary session is taking place 2 weeks after this development. We are extremely concerned about the serious impact of this referendum on stability and security in the region, its negative effect on our ongoing fight against Daesh, and which has also the potential to undermine NATO's training and capacity building activity in Iraq. This is also likely to harm the post-Daesh national reconciliation process based on inclusivity and reconstruction prospects. We expect the international community, particularly the members of this alliance, to remain consistent with the position displayed before the referendum, which stressed the risks the referendum posed against the unity of Iraq. We should keep in mind that the security crisis in the region always have spillover effects beyond its borders, and eventually this crisis evolve into matters that require our engagement. Therefore, as the Turkish delegation, we believe that Turkey's position constitutes a timely warning about the future implications of the referendum, and we will be happy if this will be taken into consideration in our further reports. Thank you.
Giulio, you want to reply?
Well, thank you for the contribution of Concar about this subject. Yesterday we had the possibility to discuss this issue, and it was the idea of a full committee that it was better to not include a paragraph in our report related to this situation. We are focused mainly about Daesh. We understand the problem and the situation of the referendum in that part of Middle East. And we noticed that really it could be a problem in that region and could create conditions to instability and perhaps more some kind of conflicts there. But we understood that in our report it was better to focus on the other aspects. But we take good note about your intervention. And it was important that you mentioned that in our plenary meeting, because we must understand that this is a real problem. And we must understand what is the sovereignty of the countries in the region. We understand what is the problem and situation of Kurds, not only in Iraq, but in other parts and other countries in the region. And the implications of this is really a real and complex, very complex problem. We know what happened after the war about the situation in the area of Kurds. We know what this implies with the borders of different countries in the area, and we know the treaties that were firmed about that, and we understand also what means a population that is more or less 15 million in the region. So it's a very complex issue. I think that you raising the question, it's a call of attention to a very special situation in this issue, but our report is mainly focused in one aspect. And the combat to Daesh is in our report with numbers that show that we are winning, that they are losing positions, they are losing territory in many aspects. And at the same time, there is another point very important, that people, migrants, came from that areas running away from the conflict that take place in that region, are going down, to say are less in this flux of migrants. So it was also good news. But I remember also to you that the beginning of the situation there, it was after the Spring Revolution that took place in many parts of Middle East and North Africa. And we understand, and you must remember what happened at the beginning in Syria, because there was a process also of democratization there. And this didn't happen. And we are there the most strong conflict with an amount of people dead there that was absolutely incredible. But the evolution is what happened, and we stress in our report to influence those that can have the possibility to have an influence and the pressure on that regime in Syria, the regime of Bashar al-Assad, that they could increase their pressure with the United Nations, with the European Union, and other elements that could pressure in order to have peace in that region. And we have, of course, it is our value, freedom and naturally democracy. So thank you for your contribution, but at the same time you understand what was our main target in our report.
Thank you. Any other comment? I see no any other comments. So who is in favor of the declaration? Raise your voting cards, please. Who is against? Abstentions? Okay, the declaration is approved. Thank you, Giulio.
Thank you. So I put the disposition of this situation here to another Canadian. Thank you.
We now move to the second draft resolution from the Political Committee on burden sharing, fulfilling the promises. No amendments also in this case. Ojar Kalnis, Chair of the Committee, please to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, this resolution on burden sharing at the Political Committee adopted yesterday is both timely and important. It's the logical follow-up to my report on burden sharing, which was also discussed and adopted by our committee yesterday. Years of underinvestment in defense has eroded allied forces and shifted the burden of responsibility for security and defense towards a few allies. This is neither fair nor sustainable. As we heard from Secretary General Stoltenberg this morning, we must do more. The contemporary international security environment demands we not only spend enough on defense, but we spend smart on defense. Today we face a broad range of challenges. First and foremost is a resurgent Russia, which is set on altering the rules-based transatlantic security architecture in its favor. It has been undermining democracy by spreading disinformation and interfering in our free and fair election process. Moreover, instability in the South continues, posing an important threat to NATO allies and partners. And domestic terrorism has struck at the heart of Europe, and in the last 2 years, attacks have been carried out in cities across Europe. We have reacted to these threats with the Wales Capability Pledge. We have committed to moving towards spending 2% of GDP on defense by 2024, and to devote 20% of our defense spending on innovation, research, and development, and the purchase of new equipment. We must also reevaluate our contributions to collective defense missions and operations as a part of the broader project of ensuring our readiness and collective defense. This resolution also recognizes the importance of diplomacy, economic aid, and political instruments to advance security and stability in the Euro-Atlantic space. These non-military components of peace and security are very important. However, they cannot replace the necessary hard tools that are necessary. We must understand that low investment in defense weakens an important piece of our comprehensive approach to meeting and ameliorating security challenges in the transatlantic. Since 2015, there has been a noticeable increase in defense investment. We welcome further planned increases in defense spending over the next 5-10 years by a number of NATO members. Many allies have also released plans to upgrade equipment critical for the defense of European borders. These are important steps for NATO. We must continue to maintain this momentum and ensure that defense investments are directed towards meeting new challenges, new capability priorities, and working towards a more efficient, equitable sharing of the cost of defense. As parliamentarians, we play an important role in shaping and leading the direction of public perception of the alliance and the defense investment in general. We must double down on our public engagement and communication and do a better job of communicating to our publics and our constituents about NATO's vital role in providing for their security. I look forward to your support on this resolution.
Thank you, Oyers. Any comments? Luxembourg.
Yes, Mr. President. I wanted to commend the Assembly because since Tbilisi, your figures are from 2015. Beforehand, they were from 2010. Nevertheless, we are going to stick to our engagement from Wales. But I tell you, if we consider the per capita defense, we spend $500 a year trailing our immediate big neighbor, Canada, by $10. Comparison to the GDP would favor our position even more. So I would be, and then as my predecessor said, we spend more than 1% of our GDP on third world aid. We are in the top 2 or 3 of that list. So I would like to, but I wanted just to say how one considers the calculation of these expenses
one needs to narrow a bit better, and then next time we'll have even better figures for our country. But we stick to this resolution. Thank you.
I will just add that one of the things we stress in both the report and the resolution is that we cannot just look at expenditure. We have to look at capabilities and at commitments that are made by countries. And many countries that have not reached the 2% GDP have made major commitments and actually lost many casualties in many NATO operations around the world.
Lord Jobling.
Mr. President, I hear what our colleague from Luxembourg says, and I'm sorry to have to be abrasive, but we do hear frequently from some of those member states who are woefully short of the 2%, finding excuses why they can't get to it and saying they spend money in other ways. Well, all I can say as an example is that my country, we are over 2%, but we also spend 0.7% of our GNP on overseas aid, and we don't attempt to say that this ought to go on the defence budget. Our friends from Luxembourg this year are spending under half of 1%, 0.44%. And I hope that instead of saying they're spending money usefully on other ways apart from defence, like other countries, and I'm thinking of Belgium and Spain as well, who are spending less than 1%, I hope they will attend to increasing their defence budget and not trying to find excuses which just don't wash.
Oh, yes?
I think there are many ways also to look at this, and one of the things we point out in our report that if a country spends over 2% of GDP, but 70% of that is for benefits and salaries, then that isn't a fair way to look at it either.
I see that every time we speak about burden sharing, there is a lot of discussion, so I suppose we have to go on and work on this point, because it's better to confront and tell us what we think than keep in our minds. So thank you for your comments. Any other point? So I see no additional comments. So who is in favor of the resolution, please raise your voting card. Who is against? Abstentions? Thank you. The resolution is approved. Thank you, Ayers. Then the last resolution from the Science and Technology Committee on maintaining NATO's technological edge. No amendments. I ask Tom Marino to present the draft resolution.
Mr. President, dear friends and colleagues, I will start with a frank statement. NATO's technological edge is eroding, and we must do something about it. If we want to safeguard our freedom and shared values, we must make strategic defense R&D policy decisions that are now both necessary and urgent. Today, NATO is confronting a new strategic reality. Russia has decided to position itself as a strategic competitor. China is a rising great power, and both are challenging the international order. At the same time, we are seeing monumental changes in science and technology, with technologies emerging that could disrupt strategic balance from additive manufacturing artificial intelligence. Moreover, our armed forces often struggle to keep up with the pace of private sector innovation or indeed to leverage it effectively and quickly. These developments create critical challenges for our transatlantic community. We are nowhere near ready to confront them. The good news is that many of us have realized that we need to increase investment. Perhaps more importantly, we are also realizing that we must rethink how we approach and organize our defense R&D. Business as usual in defense R&D is no longer viable. There's much to learn from each other, and do not get me wrong, there is no single blueprint here. What is fundamental, however, is that we deepen our information sharing or expertises, but also best practices and lessons learned. Improved coordination of defense R&D initiatives between us must also occur despite the challenges we know so well. Pursuing individual defense innovation initiatives without taking into account NATO requirements could lead to redundancies, inefficiencies, innovating into different directions, as well as to additional technological gaps within the alliance. Ultimately, allies must innovate with the same end goal in mind to make the alliance stronger. NATO must remain the forum where such coordination and knowledge exchange happens. I can assure you that the U.S. Congress and the administration are working hard to improve U.S. defense R&D. In Europe, the EU still needs to decide on the exact modalities of the European Defense Fund, but it could become a crucial part in rebuilding the European pillar of NATO. For clarity's sake, let me be blunt here. The United States currently continues to carry an unacceptable burden. Over 2/3 of the total NATO defense spending is U.S. defense spending. The resolution calls upon allies to live up to the Wales Defense Investment Pledge and move towards spending a minimum of 2% of their gross domestic product on defense and more than 20% of defense budget on major equipment, including related R&D. Americans expect you to live up to your words. If we all assume the burden together, I have no doubt that we will maintain our technological edge. However, if all allies do not live up to the pledge soon, we will fall behind. That being said, I do believe that common funding of EU-wide defense R&D and facilitating joint projects and programs could help immensely in pursuit of a fair burden sharing. But you must ensure that these efforts do not compete with or duplicate NATO's efforts. Colleagues, the world is fraught with risk and threats. The alliance must be ready for them. Defense and security R&D is vital in this endeavor because today's defense R&D lies at the heart of preserving tomorrow's credibility and freedom of action. This is what this resolution is all about. Thank you for listening, and I ask for your support.
Thank you, Tom. Any comment? I see no comments, so who is in favor of the resolution? Please raise your cards. Who is against? Abstentions? The resolution is approved. Thank you, Tom. And
Mr. President, may I have the liberty
yes,
of one
please.
moment? Thank you. I want to tell you that this has been a tremendous experience for me here at NATO. I will not be a member any longer because I've been asked to join the President's administration, and I accepted to do that. I have to go through a Senate confirmation hearing yet, but there are a couple of people that I want to thank. First, I want to thank Paul and Enrique for preparing me for today. You know, our staff makes us look very, very good, so thank you so much. I want to thank Chairman Mike Turner for asking me to be a part of NATO almost 7 years ago. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I must tell you, and Paulo, I want to thank you for your wonderful words yesterday, but I have built so many friendships here that it's remarkable. I have gained so much knowledge from you, and I've learned from you, and from traveling around the world, that I can tell my constituents back home how important NATO is and what our mission is. As I said, I learned from you so well, but also I tell my constituents, and I believe this in my heart, that NATO is truly the link between catastrophe and peace. And because of us, because of our membership, we will continue to succeed. And the reason we will continue to succeed is because that we are NATO. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Thank you, Tom. You have been a great friend of us all, and I'm sure you will continue to be our friend also in your new, very important job. So, as I told you yesterday, thank you for what you have done, and thank you for what you will do for our Assembly from your new position in the American administration. Thanks a lot, Tom. So we are very close to the end of our formal proceedings, but before closing the session, can I invite you to look ahead to the spring session in May, which will be held in Warsaw in Poland. The Polish delegation would like to show the Assembly a short video. I ask Adam Bielan to say a few words. No? No? Okay. So just show the video. Oh, okay.
Please. Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of Polish delegation, I'm very proud to welcome you all to Warsaw for the spring session in 2018, a year when the 100th anniversary of Poland's independence will be celebrated. Warsaw, the beautiful city with the unique combination of the rich history and future, as well as the Polish Sejm and the Senate, are honored to host for the third time the NATO PA members from both sides of Atlantic. All preparations are going well, and I believe that we will provide you with the atmosphere not only for lively and productive debates, but also for truly enjoyable and pleasant stay. I assure you that the Polish delegation and I will spare no efforts to make it happen. I am very much looking forward to welcoming you all to Warsaw in May. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. And now we look at the short video.
Bardzo się cieszę, że polski parlament będzie gościł Zgromadzenie Parlamentarne NATO na wiosennej sesji w maju 2018 roku. Serdecznie zapraszam.
Thank you to our Polish friends. That concludes our business here today. On behalf of the entire Assembly, I want to thank Virgil Kitsak and the Romanian delegation for hosting this fantastic session.
Thank you for appreciations. I like to think you spent beautiful and fruitful days in Romania. More than that, I am pleased with the quality of our discussion and the reports we have approved. We showed that our Assembly is able to put on the table of NATO and our governments valuable assessments of the issues faced by the alliance at the moment. I look forward to see you next time, and I wish you back home in safety. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Also, weather was carefully calculated. Rain when we had to work here, and sun today for those who will have the chance to see the beautiful Bucharest. Thank you also for the weather. And we also express our gratitude to the staff of the Parliament, to the International Secretariat, of course, who works an entire year to organize this event. Thank you to our collaborators. The police, the security staff, and the interpreters. And all the others who have helped make the session run so smoothly. And of course, thank to every one of you for the great contribution you have done to our job in these days. So the Assembly will next convene in Warsaw for the spring session in May 2018. I declare the 63rd annual session closed.